Thank you, Tane. It's so exciting to have you all here. It's also exciting to finally fulfill my mom's lifelong dream of me standing at a pulpit. In her dream, this would have been a Catholic church and I'd be wearing vestments, but, you know, pretty close, pretty close. For those of you who don't know, and I suspect many of you do, MinnPost is an independent, nonprofit newsroom. We produce paywall-free journalism to serve as a trusted guide for Minnesotans exploring the critical issues, challenges, and opportunities facing our state. And today is a live version of that work, and we're so excited to have you all here. You're an important part of it, and we're very grateful. And today makes our work year-round possible. So thank you for your support. Speaking of support, at the heart of what MinnPost does, our ability to allow and give paywall-free journalism out to our community are our members. And so I want to are there any MinnPost members here in attendance? You can raise your hand. Let's give a round of applause. Now, one thing, if you are a member and you haven't picked this up yet, today, members get this exclusive, limited edition tote. So you can sport it around town and tell everybody that you support news for Minnesotans who give a damn. And it's just dawning on me that I said damn in a church. But no lightning strikes, we're good. Now I noticed there were some people who did not raise their hands. We have an opportunity for you today, folks. So in addition to accessing the schedule by scanning that QR code, there's a link to donate. You can become a MinnPost member. You can be part of this independent, paywall-free journalism for all of Minnesotans by making a donation of any amount. It's critical support, and when you make your donation, then you can stop by the MinnPost table and get your own tote bag and sport it around town. So thank you in advance for your support. And speaking of support, and before we get to, I know we're excited for our opening keynote, we do need to thank our very generous sponsors and supporters. So, and there is thankfully a lot of them. So I'm going to thank them. I'm going to list them all, and I want you to build the anticipation of gratitude within you, and we will applaud at the end, okay? So, thank you to our presenting sponsor, McKnight Foundation, our supporting sponsors, Darla Cashin at RBC Wealth Management and Solomon Strategies Group, our promoting sponsors, Accredited Investors Wealth Management, At Sarah's Table, Chester Creek Cafe, Brave North Technology, Citizens League, Danger Boat Productions, Frederickson, Shavlik Family Foundation, the Hubbard School of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Minnesota, the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota, the League of Women Voters of Minnesota, the Minneapolis Foundation, the Minnesota Humanities Center. We also want to thank our media partners, Axios Twin Cities and Sahan Journal. We want to thank our event partners, Do Good Events and the Element Hotel Group in downtown Minneapolis. And we also want to thank our individual executive presenting supporters, Jim and Joy Erickson, Joel and Lori Kramer, Ellen Archibald. We have special thanks to Peter Hutchinson and Carla Ekdahl for supporting this opening keynote session. And we want to thank all of the generous individuals who are supporting the festival as VIP supporters. So now let's bring that gratitude forward and give them all a round of applause. Two quick housekeeping notes. One, I've been told to let everybody know there were signs coming in. That parking garage is going to close at 8 p.m. and you are not going to be able to get into it. So if you go out for dinner, don't leave your car here because the car will be spending the night. So that's one housekeeping note. The other that's more germane for this session, you all should have received little question cards when you came in. That's going to be your opportunity. We'll be collecting those a little bit later, handing them up to Laura and adding your voices, your questions into this opening keynote. So keep that in mind as you're listening. And with that, our opening keynote moderator is St. Paul native Laura Coates, who is CNN's chief legal analyst and the anchor of Laura Coates Live. Previously, she served as a trial attorney in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice during the Bush and Obama administrations, as well as an assistant United States attorney for the District of Columbia. Laura will be interviewing Keith Ellison, who has served as Minnesota's Attorney General since 2019. In that role, Attorney General Ellison has been the lead prosecutor in several high-profile cases, including approving the conviction of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin for second-degree unintentional murder of George Floyd in May of 2020. Previously in elected office, Ellison served in both the U.S. House of Representatives and the Minnesota House of Representatives. And finally, to open MinnPost Festival 2024, please join me in welcoming Laura Coates and Attorney General Keith Ellison.
Isn't this wonderful?
Lovely, lovely. How's everybody doing? Yeah, good to see you.
Independent news with no paywall. Why am I here? What's going on?
Because you love the news.
Well, we don't have anything to talk about. There's nothing happening in the world right now.
Yeah, I heard isn't there an election or something?
Is that this year?
Yeah.
Is it in 37 days, 14 hours, and 12 minutes? I mean, I don't know. I heard about this. I'm so happy I'm here. And first of all, I have to tell you, looking across this room, I see so many friends and faces. I see professors from law school. I see high school teachers. It's wonderful to see. I see old family friends and everywhere. And of course, I see you. I used to be a camp counselor for your kids.
I know it. And look how they turned out.
Don't do the math. I'm only 22. Okay? Don't do the math. Well, let's get into this conversation because, as you well know, with the election, with politics, with everything that's on the ballot, I know there's the phrase, it's the economy, stupid, but if that's all there was, people would agree a lot more. There's a lot of things happening. I want to take, first of all, the spotlight on Minnesota.
Sure.
You are in a very unique position that many people have not been in, to both have been in the legislative branch at the federal level, the state level, and now where you are as AG. I do wonder what you make of the climate that we're in politically when you look back to Washington, D.C.
Well, you know, there's no point in us not being perfectly candid. Does everybody agree with that?
This is all off the record, right? It's better if it's off the record.
I got three things that have happened that, and for me, are emblematic of the moment.
Mm.
Childless cat lady comment. If I don't win, it's the Jewish people. Y'all hear that one? And they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. You put those three things together, and for me, what's really at stake is, well, Biden put it as the soul of America, but also it's sort of like the who's in, who's out, who's a part of the body politic, who's accepted, who do we suspect is doing something nefarious. And we've got to, much like we did in like the 60s and 70s, say that we're going to embrace multicultural America all over again. Because that, in many ways, is the central appeal of one of the candidates. And the other appeal is, no, we're going to march into the future. If India can do it, Great Britain could do it, Germany can do it, then the United States can do it too. We can have a woman head of state in America. And there are way more people nervous about that than you might guess. And so that's really what's going on. Who are we? Where are we going? One side says we are an inclusive society that will make use of the talents of anyone and everyone. And the other one is saying, no, only a certain group of people, very exclusive, have the right to offer leadership in our society. That's where we're at. That's why I think it's on the line.
You know, one phrase always strikes me every time I hear it, when someone will say, this is America, that's not who we are. And you have to have pause, your head kind of cocks to the side, and you say, do you mean any more? Do you mean
it's not who we want to be.
Want to be.
It's more of an aspirational statement. Remember, you know, being a white male was not nearly good enough to cast a vote when this country was founded. You had to have property. You had to be 21. In most places, you had to be Gentile. If you were Catholic, that was a problem. One of the most famous things that George Washington ever did is he wrote a letter to the Jews of Newport, Rhode Island, affirming for them their right to practice their religion as they choose. It's called the Tourneau Synagogue. You should go there. If you ever go to Rhode Island, take a minute from the clam bake and go to this very important historic building, which is a symbol of religious tolerance in America. So absolutely, we may say that's not who we are. What we really mean is that's not who we aspire to be. But we have got to give ourselves credit and our ancestors credit for walking into a country that was, Native Americans were, decimated, African Americans, forced labor. We decapitated Mexico, forced labor for people from Asia. Women have no rights. To a country that is truly an inclusive society, so that when you lift your hand and you say "in liberty and justice for all," you can say that you mean that and it is true. Now, it's not true just because you said it. It's true because people gave everything to make it so, and it can go back again if we are not guardians of the society that we've built.
We often think about slippery slopes in the judicial context. You hear about the Supreme Court, and they'll say things like, the different variations of the Supreme Court will say things like, it's a slippery slope. If I do this, then we might have that Sisyphean feeling where you roll that rock and boulder up the hill only to have it go right back down. But you also have people where they realize that history and the accuracy of history is an inconvenient truth. Shout out to you, Al Gore, but an inconvenient truth. That's his movie, that's what I'm saying, about the idea of it. It's inconvenient because if you acknowledge the things you've said, if you talk about aspiration, if you talk about inclusivity, it's inconvenient to those who feel that otherism has dictated where we are, or that they're being left behind in that aspirational journey. You surely see that when people are talking about the ways in which to view, you mentioned Springfield, Ohio, to view those who come with a dream in hand and the expectation of inclusion.
It's funny, J.D. Vance would be the first to say, I'm here to stand up for the American dream. And for me, that means that they don't get to have the American dream. The American dream is only for certain people. And, the facts in some ways are kind of an irrelevancy, right? Look, those Haitian folks are here legally. They were invited to Springfield to work. And
they're contributing a great deal to the economy.
And they're paying market rent for everything. They're rejuvenating the economy in many ways. And if you talk to business people, any business people in the house, so many of them will say, well, we're trying to fill jobs. I can't tell you how many business folks have told me that they need people, and our country is not reproducing at a very quick rate. And if we don't have immigration, who's going to pay your Social Security? I mean, all these things are at work. But I invite you all not to sort of imagine what it would be like to be a black Haitian in Springfield, because most decent people feel for the trouble that Vance has caused them. Imagine yourself being a white 3 or 4 generation person in Springfield, because a month ago, you didn't have the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazis walking through your community. A month ago, you didn't have death threats at the school. A month ago, your city was not the eye of the culture war storm. Now it's all those things because an elected representative got up and deliberately lied about the situation in your town. And if you don't believe me, don't. Ask the Republican mayor and Governor DeWine. Both say this is not true. And so this is alarming, right? That they would rain down this difficulty on the people who live in that community. It's not fair, and it's all based on a lie. I mean, Vance said, if I have to create stories, y'all remember that? Am I making up stuff on him? No, he's making up stories. I'm not. We have to create stories in order to get something going, get some attention on this issue. I will. And I'm like, so you lie? You admit you lied? Yeah, well, that's the way it is. I wonder what will happen to him in a couple of years, or whenever he's up on the ballot. He's going to have to explain that to somebody. But I will tell you that the real challenge, if I may, Laura, is how do we get all Americans, particularly, white men over 50, to know that America is better off including everybody, right? We're better off including everybody. We're not worse off, and you're not losing anything. You're not losing anything. You might be gaining, a doctor. You might be gaining a worker at your farm. I've talked to Minnesota farmers who said, we don't need to build a wall. We need to build a road. Who's going to milk these cows? You kick all these people out of here. What are we going to do? So we've got to come to a new understanding. Now, I'm all for order on the border. No question. We absolutely have to have it. My wife is an immigrant to this country from Colombia. I'm for order on the border. And even she would tell you, she went through the process and now she's a U.S. citizen. Mm-hmm. But that does not mean that America should turn its back on immigration. We should lean into it, absolutely, if you look at some of the demographic, and I'm talking about population challenges that we're facing. You look at Japan, you look at a lot of, Russia, these countries are aging without much replacement. That is a big threat to their future productivity. But America, because people still want to come here, can overcome that if we're willing to be Big Ten.
It's interesting, I always hear this phrase, equality is not like pie. Right. You don't get less because I get a slice, right? And yet there is something very unnerving, very scary for people when they think about equality. Right. And they think about ways in which they can take it, because you have this feeling, the fear mongering in part is about people believing that if I give, then I have less, which is simply not the case, but hard to explain. But I tell you, when you think about politics as we are right now, and you've seen that this sort of fear-mongering isn't taking place in the corner of a dive bar, right, or the crazy uncle at Thanksgiving who you're like, God, just pass the potatoes. Stop talking, just pass the potatoes for a second and fill your mouth with it, I don't want to talk. Right. It's happening in the halls of Congress. Yeah. It's perpetuated as such. And it's actually counterproductive because, remember, Senator J.D. Vance is from where? Ohio. Right. And you mentioned a month ago, Springfield, Ohio residents, they were the ones having to say, no, not Springfield, Illinois, not Massachusetts, it's Ohio. Right. Now we know where they are. Yeah. Talk to me what it was like in the halls of Congress for you when you saw the self-inflicted wounds that were so counterproductive as to paralyze progress.
Well, let me just mark the moment Clay Higgins from Louisiana just gets up and says the most offensive thing ever. A member of Congress from whose roots are from Haiti. She's a Floridian. Has to confront him. He's unrepentant. He then goes and prays about it and takes the post down. Then doubles down and says, But he has a long history. So I just mark it right there. Here's the reality. When I was in Congress, the person who was most apt to say the most inflammatory thing, in my opinion, was Michelle Bachmann. She was the person most likely to say the inflammatory thing. And now she would be moderate. There's no one quite like Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert. Jim Jordan and I were classmates. We came in together. I could talk to him. He seemed like he was open to a conversation. Now he seems like he is definitely veered to the right and has gotten more intolerant, less. And so that's sort of the thing. I mean, we used to be, and I'll tell you what, even a bigger, more startling shift than Congress is the AG world. Mm-hmm. When I became an Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, I was like, what a relief. Bipartisan cooperation all over the place.
Everyone start laughing now.
No, and I'm telling you, I really, really mean it. Opioids, we were all together. All kinds of cases.
Guns, you were together.
Guns, well, no.
gun, some aspects. You're right.
So, well, guns is one of those. So you know where we started splitting apart? There's a fellow by the name of Leonard Leo. Y'all ever heard of this gentleman? If you haven't heard of him, he's a very important player in American politics today. You should get to know who he is. He was able to really reshape the American judiciary in many ways. And after he has done a lot of work there, has now gotten into the AG space so that now we can't really cooperate anymore. We used to work on a number of things together: tobacco, opioids, all kinds of things, even the algorithms for Meta. We used to work on we used to have meetings on what's going to happen with AI. And then they started, led by Ken Paxton in Texas, filing bogus lawsuits around the election, filing all this crazy stuff around immigration, attacking elections. And so now we're even, and in some of them, we have a group called the National Association of Attorneys General. And some people joke and say it's called the National Association of Aspiring Governors, but not in my case, not in my case.
Is it in your case?
No news to announce today.
We could break it today.
Right. But now they're suing to get, because when we settle cases, when we sue as a group and we settle, we put some money into the NAG account to help fund the next cause litigation. And now they're suing to get their money out and don't want to be part of NAG anymore. So we are seeing even a cracking apart of what was somewhat of a functioning group. This partisanship is severe.
Well, let me ask you about the work. Is it for so many people, when they think about justice issues related,
right,
they often think about the criminal prosecution system. That's almost the default appreciation for how one pursues justice and how it can maybe one day be caught.
Sure.
But the work you're doing here in particular is talking through the lens of consumer protection.
Right.
Using it in a way that I think people might not appreciate both the novelty and the obvious nature of being able to use this as a mechanism. Talk to me about some of the things you're doing.
Thanks for
here.
asking. So it began to occur. So as Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, the primary responsibility for criminal prosecution is not with my office.
Right.
We are the backstop prosecutor for the state of Minnesota. We do a lot of prosecution, but it's almost always when some county says we have some kind of conflict, we have some sort of a reason why we need you to take this case. And we end up doing about 60, 70 murders a year, and we do about 3 or 4 official misconduct cases, usually police, but not all the time. And so we're sort of the backup prosecutor. But when constituents said to me, well, we have a crime spike in 2021, 22, what are you going to do about it? We had to think creatively. And so we began to look at how consumer protection could be used to promote public safety. So we started a lawsuit against Fleet Farm because we allege they negligently sold guns to what's known as a straw purchaser, and those guns ended up on crime scenes, including the truck park bar in St. Paul outside of where the Wild plays, where a young woman was shot and killed and 14 other people were shot. Those Fleet Farm guns were found on the scene, and so we took the position, you sold 37 guns to a couple of people within a few weeks, and when the police executed a search warrant at their home, there were no guns there. Do you know why? He sold them all. And they actually had video of him with his phone. Do you want this one? No, that one. Okay, give me 2 of those. And there's another photo of him lifting up 2 guns. Video was from the back, showing somebody in the parking lot. He's clearly a trafficker. And we feel that one way to get guns off the street is to make sure that only people who are legally entitled to buy them are buying them. The other thing.
But a case like that, just to clarify, a case like that, one of the immediate retorts is, well, I didn't know. I'm just selling to somebody. What you do with that purchase is your business. How could I be responsible? What's your through line? How are you responding to that?
Well, the through line is that you sold 37 guns to two people within a few weeks, the same model gun. You know, as a gun seller, they're not collectors. After the 10th, 12th gun, maybe, And actually, there's evidence that people within the organization wrote a memo saying, we think this person's a trafficker, and they were ignored.
Wow.
The message being, if they got the money, they got the gun. Now look, in America, you can legally sell guns, you can legally buy guns, but you can't sell them to people who appear to be buying them from you to sell them to people who are prohibited from having them. And so we're not trying to shut gun stores down. We're trying to make them go by their legal obligation. Now, that's just one example. We also are in pre-litigation, but very active, trying to find if we can settle it before we have to file something in the Kia Hyundai situation. Now, if you own a Kia or a Hyundai, there's a fairly good chance that your car's been stolen within the last few years. Because
remember to move your car by 8 p.m. downstairs. And if you do move it, it may have been stolen.
Right. So like 98% of all cars on the road have engine immobilizer devices in them. Only about 26% of Kia Hyundai within a certain number of years have those same immobilizers. Those same model cars have engine immobilizers in Europe when they sell them. But if you can save a few bucks by not putting the engine immobilizer in there, you can drive down the cost of the car, therefore drive up the profit on each sale. And we have seen literally 600, 800% increase in the theft of these cars. And no thanks to TikTok or YouTube, because if you go on there, the Kia boys will teach you exactly how you can steal these cars with a UBS cord. And they were doing it, and the numbers shot right through the roof. We had a Hmong elder who was killed in a car accident because some 12-year-old kid stole the car and hit her and killed her. And there have been several other auto accident deaths, but then there's just a horror of walking out to the parking lot and seeing glass where your car used to be. And so this has happened to more people than I could possibly describe. And what we're saying is auto theft is a crime of opportunity. Let's diminish and decrease the opportunity by putting standard equipment in the car like you should have done from the jump. And so we're doing that, and this is an important thing. And to the credit of Kia and Hyundai, they are coming up with some ideas, but we're not quite satisfied yet that we've got to solve this problem. And then you all, who here knows the corner Broadway and Lindale? A couple of years ago, did that corner have a bit of a reputation? That corner, if you wanted to buy dope, that's a good place to do it. People strung out. It was a tough corner, very tough corner. And so, the neighborhood community, the churches, the volunteer organizations, the police were arresting people, but it just really wasn't working. So what we did is we said to the gas station and the liquor store that we believe you can do more. And in Minnesota, we said we're gonna sue you for nuisance. But in Minnesota, it's a notice system. So I can't just sue somebody for a nuisance. I got to give them notice that in 30 days, if you don't mitigate, we're going to sue you and enjoin you from doing what you're doing. And to their credit, the gas station got 24-hour security. The liquor store changed management and did some aesthetic changes that made it hard to just go in one way, buy your dope, and go out the other way. Yeah. And within a short period of time, police incidents, critical incidents, which used to be like, 15, 20 a day, dropped down to 2 or 3 a month. Your Attorney General is telling you that Broadway and Lindale is a safe corner today. I am telling you that, And so now look, it took everybody to get that corner safer. And by the way, a lot of the crazy stuff moved. So we're not done. We're still eyeing it. But the point, though, is that the Attorney General has to be a part of the overall criminal justice approach. And here's the beauty of using these civil tools. And I got more examples, but here's the beauty. One is to charge, to investigate and then charge or get an indictment on a defendant. You've got to go through. It's a lot of work. And you should, even in the beginning, have a sense that you can prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, you only got to prove by the preponderance of the evidence.
More likely than not.
More likely than not. You get two-way discovery. In a criminal case, how much discovery do you get from the defendant? None. Basically, sometimes.
I think it's the timing of it. At what point you have to give it. You have to make sure they don't have anything that could exonerate them. We'll talk about that in a second.
Brady material. But in a civil case, you depose them, they depose you. You make document requests on them, they make document requests on you. So you can really find out and get to the bottom of what's going on.
Both have a hand in the solution. They're equally invested. Right,
and they're equally. And then when you settle the case, nobody's going to jail. It's a matter of money or usually injunctive relief. And you can, because all I'm going to tell you right now, there might be many things we want out of Fleet Farm, but one of them will be you must be more stringent and on alert about these straw purchasers. You must. And you're going to have to agree to it. And I'll tell you all that right now. And so you can get injunctive relief, you can get remediation, you can get restitution for victims. So these civil, and then because you're trying to prevent the next crime, nobody's actually, the shooting death doesn't happen. If the gun's not sold, the gun's not bought by the straw purchaser, then not sold again, and then Markeisha Wiley, and the next Markeisha Wiley isn't dead, maybe, right? And so the pastor didn't do the funeral, right? And so we're hoping to prevent these. Now, we're not trying to replace criminal prosecution. It's important to be done. It's important to be done right.
Right.
But,
well, let me ask you before you go on that. I want to get to the audience questions in just a second. We don't have that much time left. But I do want to ask you, you're talking about the civil side. But this week, we have seen the execution of Marcellus Williams.
Oh, my goodness.
This was a man in Missouri who has always maintained his innocence about the killing of a 1998 killing of I believe it was a reporter named Felicia Gale. He's always maintained his innocence. The prosecution in this case recognized that there were some questions about the integrity of the conviction, that the chain of custody or the way that the actual weapon was handled inside of the courtroom lent itself to believe that there may be some reason that they could not prove his guilt or that his innocence could be questioned. They asked for a stay, meaning let's not execute, give this person literally, the ability to live to fight another day about this issue. Instead, he was executed nonetheless. The family of the person who was killed did not want there to be the execution at that level. The prosecution said, we don't want this, but they were denied that. And you have worked in death penalty cases in the past. I happen to be vehemently and morally opposed to them, to death penalty cases, never prosecuting a jurisdiction that had one. When you saw that, what went through your mind about people's belief in the integrity of the justice system and the elusive quality of it?
I was shocked and hurt to the point where I couldn't really talk about it for the first few days. And, let me tell you, as Attorney General, so the reason that Marcellus Williams ended up being executed when he very well could be innocent is because the Attorney General said no. And that was a very important part of what ended up happening. And then you had so there you go. And I guess Supreme Court justices refuse to hear
6-3 on surprise, surprise, ideological
Funny how that number always
It's funny
shows
how
up.
that what do you think about the way, get a show of hands for a moment. Has your opinion of the United States Supreme Court and their objectivity decreased since the last couple years? Show of hands. Isn't that telling? This used to be one of those institutions that was, it all smelled like roses all the time.
Yeah.
They were, quote unquote, above the fray. They were not viewed, do you view them as political? Show of hands? Yes? How about no? Oh.
And Laura, this is really bad, as you know, because the executive branch has the FBI, they have coercive force. That's what it means to be an executive branch officer. You can make people do things. The legislative branch has the power of the purse. We're not funding that. Sorry, you have no money to operate. But the only thing that the judiciary really has is the confidence of the people. And they're squandering it. So that's bad.
But follow that thread. What happens if the confidence is gone? Does that mean that precedent, not just the nuance of precedent, but precedent is only as good as if people follow it?
Right.
What happens if it is squandered?
Well, I think what it leads to is a disrespect for law, and people will not abide by, the rules. Here's the thing about precedent. Even if you don't like the precedent, it gives predictability, foreseeability. So we might not like the rules, but at least we know what they are. Now we don't know what they are. We had 3 people who said, oh, Roe v. Wade, law of the land, absolutely law of the land. Of course it's law of the land.
At their confirmation hearing.
At their confirmation hearing. Then they get their chance and it's like, not so much. Not so much anymore. This is very strange. Even if you disagree with the decision, stare decisis, and precedent should have led us to a certain conclusion, but it didn't. Ditto on guns with Bruin, ditto on campaign finance reform, ditto on a number of things. And so, and it's not just at the Supreme Court, it's in the circuits as well. It's very, very difficult. I'll tell you, I know we're talking about death penalty, but I will mention very quickly that the 8th Circuit, which we live in, determined that the Voting Rights Act, the part to challenge things like cracking and packing and dilution. Do y'all following me right now? That only the Attorney General of the United States, only the Justice Department could challenge a state's voting scheme, and it could not be done by private groups like the NAACP or MALDOF or any other, or ACLU. Now, just so you understand how serious that is, there's been about 200 challenges since 1965 under the Voting Rights Act under Section 2. 185 have been these civil rights organizations like the ACLU, NAACP. So only 15 have been the Justice Department. So what if only 15 cases could be challenged because the DOJ doesn't have the capacity to keep up with all of the problems? We're really looking at, for the purposes of the 8th Circuit and the states in the 8th Circuit, which includes Minnesota, Arkansas, the Voting Rights Act is a nullity. That should scare everyone.
And this is after Section 5, the pre-clearance provision that enabled the Attorney General and Department of Justice to authorize any changes to an election-related activity, particularly in states with a formula based on their history of discrimination. That's gone, and Congress was left to their own devices to recalibrate that formula. Again, the incentive was not to do so. But I think it's worth and bears repeating to underscore the point you're raising. A lot of attention on the Supreme Court, a lot of what happens is in the lower courts, including circuit courts.
Yep.
I want to get to the questions for a moment.
Sure.
I think a lot of you have them, and thank you for participating. It's like democratic in here. Okay, one of the questions, how would you bring more order into the chaos at our southern border? And they end with specifically.
Yeah,
they're on to politicians out there.
And let me just say, whoever asked the question, it's not my area of expertise. I'm an attorney general, I'm a lawyer, I'm a legislator, and operating at the border is not what I do every day. It's not what I'm trained in. So I'm not trying to not answer your question. I'm just trying to tell you on the front end that you got me out ahead of my skis a little bit on that question. Having said that, what would I do?
Scroll.
Right. Number one, we have got to stabilize our neighbors in Central America. We have got to do that. You know, and honestly, friends, there are things that we do that contribute to their instability, right? We have got to, for example, we embraced a guy named Juan Orlando Hernandez. You ever heard of him? He was the president of Honduras. He just got convicted a few days ago for narco trafficking in the United States. His brother was convicted of it before that. He basically threw out the democratically elected president in Honduras. And we said it was okay. And then he came into power. Then we catch him selling dope into the United States. If we would have just stood with the Organization of American States and said, we're not going to let a coup leader, we will oppose a coup leader running for president after a coup, we wouldn't have a Juan Orlando Hernandez. We wouldn't have a narco state in Honduras. We would have more stability, and those people who are walking from Tegucigalpa, San Pedro Sula, and those cities would not be in the caravan that we heard about a few years ago. It is, and there's a lot of other things that I could say, but I'm saying we've got to help stabilize it. Now, in Venezuela, I do think the United States is right to challenge human rights abuses in Venezuela. But you should understand the effect of the embargo in Venezuela is that people are leaving Venezuela, going through Colombia, walking through the Darien Gap. Do y'all know what that is?
Yeah.
And it is, if you don't know what it is, it's probably the most dangerous place in the Western Hemisphere. And they're walking through there, children, everybody, and they're going up north. And there are people from all over the world doing it. I would say that it is important to restore order on the border. But you can't just build a wall. You've got to make sure that people don't leave their home to come in the first place. And then the other thing that we have got to do is we have got to let more people in through legitimate channels. It takes a long time to get certain visas into the United States. And so, I mean, this is important. We've got to speed up. That's why having more judges is a good idea. It's not a bad idea. So I could say much, much more. But again, if you put me on the border and made that my job, I could tell you exactly what to do. That's not what I do. So I give that caveat.
Well, thank you for your honesty, and also the very poignant belt and suspenders approach to all things. But I think I was struck by your initial statement. I'm a legislator, I'm an attorney, I'm an AG, and this is not my area of expertise. That tells you how difficult it is for people to really wrap their mind around the solution in the end.
It ain't simple.
Important.
Build a wall is simple.
Yeah.
Build a wall. But it's
Was that your impersonation? Hold on. Do you have more bags of tricks? Hold on. What's going on?
Hey, man.
Is it a huge wall? What is it?
It's a huge wall.
Okay.
They're eating the cats. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the pets, the people who live there. So anyway, bottom line is it's complicated.
It is.
And look, barriers are a part of the solution. They're not the only part of the solution. And a lot of people who end up here without proper authorization don't cross the southern border. They come in on an airplane, they overstay a visa.
Details. That's inconvenient for the message. I'll tell you that. But let me go. Thinking of barriers, there's a good question here. I'll paraphrase it. Well, please describe in more detail the resistance to a female president. If you could give examples or data. And he said, thanks. I love being back in Minnesota.
You know what? That is a wonderful question. It's a question that we've got to really confront. I think that we are dealing with machismo, misogyny, machoism, that a lot of men just think that that's not what women should be doing. And if you have any doubts about whether those attitudes are prevailing, where does somebody a United States senator get up and say that the purpose and highest use for a post-menopausal woman is to look after grandkids.
That gave me a hot flash. How about you?
I mean, we've got to redefine manhood and womanhood. Women are leaders of countries all over this world. My personal concept of authority is female, because my mom's female. My personal concept of who is the boss is my grandmother. And so all of us have examples of female leadership, but they got to leave the home and move into the Capitol building and in the White House and the governor's mansion. And so so it really is an attitudinal thing we've got to root out. And so, we've got to understand. I mean, I think that, here's a question that Kamala Harris asked, I think it was Kavanaugh. What legal restriction is on the male body? Because we got them on women's bodies. But if you're a man, you can get all the vasectomies, you can get all the pills you want to take, anything you want to do. But on women, no, you can't, not you. And this is deeply rooted in our culture, and we've got to unearth this. And let me tell you, we will be better off. I was talking to a young man a few weeks ago he was telling me about how his grandfather would never be able to respect him because his wife makes more money than him, and she has equal say in the household, and he's got to change diapers, and his grandfather just ruled the roost. And I said, man, your grandfather probably has no idea how much better off you are than he was. Because here's the thing, if your wife is assuming a hetero couple, if your wife is a victim of, say, discrimination on the job and is paid less because she's female, your whole family income is lower now. Think about that. This is the difference between new shoes and no new shoes, going on a vacation, no or not. We've just got to break through this thing, and it'll be normal for women to be president, and we will be a better, more prosperous society because of it. Yeah. Can you truly be a great society if you are denying yourself the genius of actually more than half of the population?
We'll leave it there for a moment and just say to that person's grandfather, may you and your views rest in peace. Finally, really quickly here, in the time we have left, this is a very important question for so many people as the election's coming. What are you doing to protect poll workers and election officials?
Good question. We're doing a lot. So we're working closely with Secretary Simon, and we've been meeting regularly. We've been meeting with all the Dem AGs. We'd love to work with the Republican AGs, but we are working with a lot of Republicans, just none of them are AGs, for democracy and to stand against autocracy. I sat on a panel like this one, Laura, with no less than Bill Kristol, and a bunch of pretty conservative people who I thought I disagreed with, but they're against autocracy. So I'm like, we are on the same team now. We got a coalition from Cheney to Chomsky. Imagine that.
It was so to process.
So like that's kind of a lot of space. So what are we doing? We are, first of all, we're putting out election information. Second of all, we are making people understand that if they try to, 4 years ago, there was a company called Aegis, who was recruiting in Tennessee and Kentucky to hire people to be armed guards outside of polling stations. And I sued them and said, if you try it, we're gonna take legal action against you and fast. They backed down right away. But that's what we're doing. We've had several letters that we've traded with CPAC, several letters that we've traded with certain Republican candidates whose name I will not mention. I'm not giving them any press, and not for partisan reasons, but for democracy reasons. And so we've been engaging in this process, making sure that Minnesotans know that elections are free, fair, and safe in Minnesota. There was a professor who looked at over 13.4 million votes. That's a lot of votes. Found 3 cases of proven imposter voting. That you need 4 zeros after the decimal to get to what that is, maybe more. There is no non-citizen voting in Minnesota. And imagine, think about it this way. You've walked from Venezuela all the way to Minnesota. You've escaped all of the dangers that are in your way. All you really want to do is work. And yes, you got some legal barriers you have to deal with. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But why then would you vote, do something that you know is illegal, and jeopardize all of that, not be able to remit any money to your family who's counting on you? It's irrational. No sane person would ever do it.
A republic, if you can keep it, Keith Ellison.
All right now. Thank you. Good job.